It's Monday morning here in Salt Lake City, and over the weekend the big storm that is currently hammering Denver swept over the valley here. Now, although we're not getting nearly the amount of snow and unexpected early winter as they are in Colorado, nevertheless there is a skiff of snow and a reminder of winter all around us as we woke up this morning. This winter is nothing compared to the winter of Valley Forge, when Washington and his troops were being pressed aggressively by Howe as he moved further and further inland in an attempt on behalf of the British to destroy the American troops that were desperately trying to defend the new and emerging nation. Now, it was common at the time for us to try to recruit from the continent, specifically from France, soldiers, professional soldiers, who would be willing to fight on our behalf and provide, at least in Washington's expectation, some of the expertise in command that the new American army lacked in some cases. And so there was an effort on the continent to go out and recruit men who had fought in Europe, who had this experience of command, and to offer them in exchange for their services both financial remuneration and title, specifically to be made generals if they had been colonels, or to be made generals of higher status, etc. One of those men who was recruited through this process was a guy named Thomas Conway. Now, Thomas Conway initially was someone George Washington thought was going to be a tremendous ally, a tremendous support, and a tremendous resource in helping Washington command the troops, especially as they were bogged down that winter at Valley Forge. What did not become obvious immediately, especially to Washington, because he was a man of such high integrity and couldn't imagine duplicity in others, but what became obvious first to others and then to Washington was that Conway was much more interested in his own success, in his own elevation, in his own ego, than he was in helping Washington and the young American army succeed in their particular responsibilities. Conway began to gossip, he began to complain, he began to put pressure on Congress to elevate him to a military status that would have been higher than some of Washington's American commanders. The American commanders who found out about it first before Washington were, of course, offended. They were the ones who had been freezing and struggling and starving and bleeding, and were offended that someone would come simply from overseas and be elevated above them in the command structure. And so they went to Washington. Washington at first assured them that there must have been a misunderstanding. What began to happen over time is that Washington began to realize that everyone, not just Conway, but also those in the Congress, who were sleeping in their own beds, eating a healthy meal every night before they went to sleep, in other words, safe, secure, warm, and comfortable, that all of these people were more concerned with running his campaign than they were with letting Washington do the things he felt were necessary. Now, if you study Washington at all, you know that he is a man of incredible integrity, but of emerging military skill. He made a number of mistakes. He was not a perfect military commander, but he was committed to his men, he was committed to the country, he learned from his mistakes, and when he made them, he made sure that he suffered for them as much as those who were in his command. One of the great lessons of Home of the Brave is learning how to let leaders lead. If we, of our own free will, choose to join a leadership team, it is our responsibility, I believe, to work to help that team succeed rather than to try to undermine it, to substitute personal agendas for public responsibilities, etc. If we take the situation Congress put Washington in, I think one of the things we need to learn is to let leaders who know the situation on the ground best make the primary decisions. It was common practice at the time Washington was in command for troops to overwinter, that is, to not fight in winter, but to use winter as a time to rebuild, to recamp, to re-strategize, because of the fact that getting resources, food, clothing, weapons, bullets, etc., was very difficult in winter. The Congress, again, because they were living in comfort, refused to allow Washington to overwinter his troops. The consequence being the nightmare that we know historically as Valley Forge and the tremendous unnecessary suffering that so many people went through. For those of us who are called to follow rather than to lead, let's learn these important lessons. When we join a leadership team, let's work in every way to support those who lead. Now, that doesn't mean we can't bring issues to their attention. That doesn't mean that in the right circumstance and in private we cannot express our real concerns, even appropriately criticize. But it does mean that we need to be supportive and not working to undermine. For those of us who are not in the field, who do not understand both the demands of battle and the responsibilities of the troops, let's let them make the decisions as to what they should do, how they should do it, and then let's work from our point to give them those things they need to succeed. Because that success, of course, is not limited to themselves. It is the success they achieve on our behalf, for our freedom, for our lives, for our opportunity. Look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.